Welcome back. Obviously for you it's been a week since we're last here, but for me I've had a whole Christmas and New Year to get out of practice. As you can see, we've still got the Christmas tree in the background here. And I think outside at the minute we're about -4 and expecting snow. So yeah, very much feeling New Year ready to crack into things again. However, more importantly, lesson 2, or session 2, I should say lesson, these are more about giving you an idea of weapons that we do rather than necessarily, I would say, teaching them. But we've been looking at sword and buckler, and we looked very much at a kind of introductory session. What I'm going to look at this week is how we're going to stand with the buckler. Now, we've talked a lot about having the buckler right the way out in front, and I want to keep it out there as much as possible. So I can combine that movement with most of the guards that we're already familiar with. So if we were familiar with Codalunga, fairly standard guard we use a lot in sidesword, I can just throw my buckler out and there I have Codalunga for buckler. Nice and easy. And I can follow that principle through. I can quite happily change my feet round, and this would actually be the preferred version of Codalunga that I would actually use. So this is Codalunga Alta, not one we use a lot in single side sword because it puts this offside forward. But actually, when I'm using the buckler, that's what I want, because the further I can push this towards my opponent, the more area it actually covers. So I want to have my Codalunga Alta being my standard on that side. Also, you can see quite easily from here, I can bring my hand up and I can use guard at El Corno, and that's still quite useful. Very aggressive kind of guard there, where you really got to kind of deal with that point and the buckler and get in low. This is very closed down, very kind of defensive as well as being quite aggressive. On the other side, obviously we've got our Porta de Ferro, which we can do here. And again, this starts to really cross the arms over. So I tend not to use Porta de Ferro quite a lot. But again, if I switch my feet round, so I'm here and I can do my Shingahali Porta de Ferro, here I can have quite a nice guard. And I like this one because it leaves the other side of my body open. If I go in for my Codalunga, it's very hard to kind of guess where my opponent is going to go. They're either going to come in, try and sneak over the gauntlet here, but more likely or not, that front leg starts to look like a target. And unless I'm deliberately playing for that and I'm ready with my slip, it's not really an area that I want them attacking. Whereas if I come across here in this guard, then this shoulder, this side of my head starts to look very appealing. Yeah, so again, I kind of know where that's coming, and that gives me the opportunity to kind of deal with those attacks when they come in. So I'm going to prefer those guards, okay? Now, obviously there I've only discussed 3 of them. When we talk about our 5 points, if you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and have a look at our basic sidesword stuff. I've got both hips and we've looked at head. There's then shoulders. Well, I'm not really going to use the shoulders as a guard, much like I wouldn't do in single sidesword. I'm never going to come on guard here because it doesn't really give me an advantage. All I'm going to say here, I'm going to cover why later on, tends to be when I'm going into something like guarded to entry, I'm going to bring my hand on top. I think it was like putting a hat on it, just covering my hand as I come in for that thrust. Equally, if I'm across on the other side and guarded to Fakia, I'm likely to have that hand on top as an extra protector for my hand. Much like you would see in earlier pieces, early materials such as I-33 Fetch 1, I think it's called now, where you get that kind of, the buckler is constantly covering the hand. We're not quite as locked as that because we really want to use this geometry to our advantage. However, when we use those shoulder guards, we still do have this covering. So that gives us our 5 ones, and I always say there's 5 plus 1 because there's 5 that are in the same position every one, and then guarded the tester floats around a lot. Now, it didn't when we were looking at sidesword, obviously, it's here. When we look at sword and dagger, it's here. When we look at buckler, it actually comes down because what we're going to do is we're going to push our hand forward. And obviously, if I want to bring it forward, it's going to come lower. So I'm actually going to make this a lower angle. Now, why am I doing that? Because I want it to meet with the shield. And if the shield's out here, it means my hand has to be out here as well. Now this covers my head as well as this, because as you can see, I'm pushing it forward. So I'm relying on those angles to make things work. Which means I can have my guard here, something coming in from my head could be blocked here, and that gives me a really strong, solid guard in the tester. So that gives us our basic guards in what I would call traditional or point forward or narrow play. That's the correct term. Let's actually use the correct term. That's the narrow play guards that we've looked at in other systems. What I'm going to go on to look at next week is the wide play guards. Guards that are less commonly used with the single sidesword or with sword and dagger. And we'll have a look at those and I'll explain them in a bit more detail next week. So hopefully you're starting to get a feel for how it looks, and we're going to move on and deal with some of the other aspects of it and those other guards that we're probably going to be using more often next week. Until then, have a great time. Catch you later.